Well, we start this hour. Friend of the program, evangelist, pastor, and all-around good fella, David Nasser is back. Nasser, how about it, buddy?
Hey, man. Good morning.
Well, you know what? Nasser and I hung out yesterday afternoon. We had a blast, didn't we?
It was great, man.
That was
Thanks
fun.
for coming out.
You know, and Nasser and Christ City Church do a lot of work in the inner city. And yesterday, it was interesting to watch an Iranian.
Easy,
What?
Gosh, I don't know what.
What?
Iranian.
You know what? You've thrown.
Iranian.
You know,
Iranian?
Listen, you've thrown me a curve by bringing in cupcakes in the jar.
Yes, I
You
did.
know it, and
With a wooden spoon.
And all I could think about
good,
was,
too.
so you can eat a cupcake right out of that jar.
That's Christ City Cupcakes right there, buddy.
But if you have an Iranian and a bearded white redneck riding together through the hood, you'll get looks.
We did. We got some looks
We
yesterday.
really did get some looks.
Oh, just drop. Go with this one, Speedy. Right here.
What is red velvet? Let's talk about
Yeah, man.
these.
This is me.
What do you have here?
Well, I brought y'all some Christ City Cupcakes. They're going to be
buddy.
sold at the Tanny Hill Rodeo this
Yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
The Tanny Hill Rodeo folks this Friday and Saturday have been gracious enough to allow us to be Christ City Church, our mission center, the Christ City Center, to be the charity arm of the rodeo.
How cool is that?
About 6,000 people will
that
come
this-
out this weekend,
Yeah.
and we'll have a silent auction. One of the prizes will be a VIP birthday party here in the morning.
That's
with some
right.
golden
Yeah,
seeds.
yeah. If you're going to that
Greg.
rodeo this weekend and you're helping out, obviously we just talked about their mission center
Yeah.
that serves some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, and but you're also given a chance in the silent auction. You could not just get one seat, but all 12 seats.
That's right.
For a day here to watch the show with you and your own group.
That's right.
A private Rick and Bubba showing.
Yeah, man. So there's the silent auction, all
Yeah.
kinds of different stuff. And one of the things we'll have these gourmet cupcakes, so people can
In
buy
a
them.
jar.
They come in a mason jar.
You get them in the
wooden
mason and
spoon.
eat them with a spoon.
That's
Wooden
right.
spoon.
It's like the redneck little Pinterest thing going on right here. And so 4 flavors. It's going to be awesome, man. So we
good
we
stuff.
brought you guys some Christ City Cupcakes.
That's awesome.
that? No
And-
mess. I
and
like
When
it.
you open it up, like there's an imprint of a biblical character
I
on
missed
top
that.
of each one of these.
Helmsy ate his.
give me a disciple or give me breakfast. You
Just
know?
hope you don't get Judas.
Right.
If you get the Judas
Oh,
one,
Right, that's the one. That's the,
the
one.
cream
that
has
hurt.
gone bad. All right, don't eat the Judas.
You know, we were talking yesterday as you were showing me the what's going on with Christ City Church and getting to tour the location and had a great time together yesterday. And but it dawned on me, and Speedy and I had been talking about it, and Bubba too, that when we say the name David Nasser, you've authored books that have done real well. You've spoke at the biggest events around the country and around the world, and like I say, also a pastor of Christ City Church, which was a relatively new call in your life over the last several years. And you were on the show when that first happened, but it's been a while. And I just feel like that you've got one of those testimonies that could really impact somebody watching or listening today. And some people may not even know your story. I mean, but it's a fascinating story. We were kidding around about you being from Iran, but that's not a joke. You
No, I really am. Yeah.
that's where you were a child, and the thing of the process of you becoming a Christian, being raised, Muslim, and how and your family and all that. A lot of people don't know the story.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to tell it again.
Sure, man.
So, and
Well,
you've told us a
absolutely.
lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Have you got it down
Yeah,
pat?
it's
yet?
my testimony. It's just an opportunity to boast on the power of the gospel. Man, if you had told me when I was 9 years old that one day I would be a pastor of a church in Birmingham, or that I'd be on your show talking about God, or bringing Christ City Cupcakes to somebody,
Yeah, and
to try to raise awareness and funding for inner city work, I'd laughed at you, because the last thing I wanted when I was 9 years old was to have anything to do with God. I know most 9-year-olds don't think stuff like, I hate God. Most 9-year-olds think stuff like, I don't know, should I eat this crayon or whatever.
Yeah,
But man,
sure.
I was 9 years old when I saw the Iranian Revolution happen in my country, and I saw 1/36 of my nation massacred and killed. I remember when, I call it religion gone wrong, when the Ayatollah Khomeini and his people took over our country. And when the government was overthrown, I remember those days. My dad was high-ranked in the military, and so we lived in this army base in Iran. And I remember the first week of the revolution, a school assembly at my little military school, where a soldier came, called my name out in front of the entire school. I went out to the front. He dropped the piece of paper that had my name on it. He took a gun out of a holster, put it at my head, and said, because of Allah, because of God, he needs to kill me. And so when you're 9 years old and someone says, because of God, they need to kill you, you begin to have an understanding, at least even if it's miscued, of what you think God's going to be.
And the reason that he said that is what you just said. Your dad was serving in the
ranks.
military that was being overthrown
That's right.
by the revolution, by the Ayatollah.
That's right. So fear is the greatest weapon of terror. You know, is the thing that drives terrorism. And so they were overthrowing the government, and they were killing everybody who was anybody, and they were taking out families at a time. And so I was just a kid of a high-ranking military officer. But the principal got between me and the gun, told the guy to come back another day. For all I cared, the brother didn't need to come back. And I went home and told my dad what had happened. And my dad told me, he said, there's a revolution going on. This is bigger than us, and we're planning our escape. Before we could escape, I remember soldiers coming to my house and dragging my father out of our house. I remember literally my mom hanging onto the leg of one of the soldiers and just begging him out loud, just kill him quickly, just kill him quickly. And when you're 9, you don't understand why your mom's saying, kill him quickly. But I found out later it was because they were taking my dad to the same park where they had taken many military men like him. And they had tied people like my father's friend to a tree the day before. And they were picking them apart piece by piece, you know, in slow torture. And so my first memory ever of prayer, guys, was after my dad took my dad out, my mom held our hands and she started to pray. And she was like, please, God, if you're up there, just let him die quickly. Let him die quickly. And so that's the kind of stuff that happens when religion goes rogue, you know.
Right.
And so that afternoon, my dad came home. He wasn't killed, and we planned our escape, and it was pretty dramatic in how we escaped. But basically, we used my mom's heart issues as a way out. We went to these
your
doctors.
mom had some heart disease, and
yeah, she had a record of heart issues, and so we went to these doctors and we said, look, we got to get out of this country, and we want to leverage these paperwork, these records to get us out. And so we paid these doctors our homes, our cars, our clothes, everything that we owned. We gave to these doctors, millions of dollars worth of assets, and we said, help us get out. And we rushed my mom to the hospital a couple of weeks later. She acted like her heart was bothering her. It was all fabricated, and they took her in this back room. They came out, said she needs bypass surgery, even though she didn't need it. And, man, we got the homework assignments like we were going and coming back for this surgery to Switzerland. And we got the house sitter and all this different stuff. Well, we weren't coming back.
Right, but you had to make it look like you were.
Yeah, and I remember, man, going to the airport. I remember, you know, holding my dad's hand in the airport, and his hand just kept shaking, and he kept saying, if they find out we're escaping, they're going to kill us right here on the spot. But when you look at your testimony, it's not so much that, you know, disciple now, disciple later, see the pole, see the sprinkler, kumbaya, the event, or whatever, where you get saved. It's like how before you even knew God, God knew you, right? And he was working in your life. And so I look back now, I can see how God's righteous right hand just took us out of Iran.
All right, when we come back, we'll pick it up right there. For the Rick and Bubba Show, David Nasser with us today, author and evangelist and pastor of Christ City Church, giving his testimony. If you missed the first segment, his dad, high-ranking military officer, when the Ayatollah Khomeini had the revolution to overthrow the government, his dad obviously would be in the crosshairs of that, including his family, and now they are fleeing Iran and are at the airport going to the plane under the guise that his mother, who did have heart issues, needed to go to Switzerland to get bypass surgery, and you had to pretend, get a house sitter, all the things you would do if you were coming back. But you knew, even as a 9-year-old little boy, or were you 10 at this time? Was it 9?
I was about 9, yeah.
That you knew what the plan was. Y'all were not.
Yeah, we were hugging our family and saying goodbye, knowing that we might never see them again.
Right.
As a matter of fact, my mom never got to see her mother before she passed. My father never got to see, you know, a lot of their family members, and we knew we'd be on the list if we escaped.
Right? Would that still be the case right now?
That's the case right now.
You could never go back to Iran.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Or if you do, they don't need to know you're there.
Well, for example, a couple of years ago, I was going to Israel to shoot a video series.
Yeah, I saw that great series.
Thanks, man. And on our way to the series, on our way there, we realized that we were going to fly from Germany over Iran to get to Israel, and they said, "Hey, listen, if we have to have an emergency landing in Iran, they're not going to recognize your American citizenship. They're going to see place of birth Iran. They're going to look you up and see that you escaped, and they'll just not recognize it. They'll just pull you off the plane." So we had to go around. Everybody else flew one way, and me and my family, we flew around. Well, we weren't flying over Iran.
Just in case.
Just in case. So, yeah, we're wanted, I guess, as a family over there. But we escaped, and we got in the airplane. And I remember my dad looking at me in the airplane and saying, "We're going to be okay now." And we landed in Switzerland, and instead of going to the hospital, we went to the American embassy. We went straight to the American consulate, and we applied for this thing called political asylum, which is a fancy way of saying we want to become refugees.
Right.
But at that time, nobody was allowing Iranians into America because people were watching on TV how the Americans, were being held hostage from the American embassy in Iran.
You realize you lived the movie Argo?
That's basically it.
Your family just had a mini Argo.
Exactly, man. We flew out of that airport, and when all that stuff was happening, when every day the news started in America with Day 54, the hostage situation. We are in Europe trying to make it to America, and the doors just aren't opening up. And so for months we tried. For 9 months we tried, legally, illegally, every way we could.
So what do you do during that time? Where do you live?
We lived in an apartment complex for a little while in Switzerland. Then we moved to Germany. I went to a military school in Germany, in Munich, Germany, a little army base. My dad was military from the past. He knew a lot of military people, so he got us to get in there a little bit. And every day my dad would go to the American consulate and just beg for our case, and the doors wouldn't open up until one day my mom got us together, and she said, hey, we've been trying to go to America. I've got an idea. She goes, we ought to pray to the American God to let us into his country.
Now, are you serious?
Yeah. She showed us a picture
now,
of a white guy with a beard.
Y'all are all Muslim at this point.
Yeah. She said, it's like this white man with a beard and a mullet. And she said, this is, it was on a pancake, by the way. It was on a pancake. It was on a pork chop. Yeah. By the way, how sweet would that be if there was a grill mark of Jesus on a pork chop?
Now, that would have so much irony, no one could stand.
But going back to my story here, my mom showed us this picture of Jesus, and I'm not kidding. She said, this is Jesus. He's American.
He's American.
And we want. Isn't that funny, by the way? I know that's not funny to some of your listeners. They're like, he is American. He's actually more from my neck of the woods than y'all's neck of the woods. Right. But she goes, this is Jesus. He's American, and we ought to ask him to let us into his country. And we did. We prayed. We said, Jesus, please let us into your country.
Are you serious?
And isn't that funny? Because I tell people that to say, like, that's not the prayer that took. But a week after we prayed in Jesus' name, the doors opened up, and we were coming to America. And so as a kid who hated religion, who saw it destroy my country, yeah, Greg, I was like, man, I hate religion, and we've had to leave everything behind, but this Jesus is pretty cool, And so we fly to America, and I thought things were going to get better, but they didn't, because we moved to Texas. We moved to Killeen, Texas, where the largest Army base in the world is, Fort Hood, because my father was a pilot, so he thought, I'll go there and become an American pilot, Yeah. And so we moved to a military town in Texas where people are super patriotic. We are the Iranians that they're watching on TV. So we are like a wedgie waiting to happen, right?
No offense, but that doesn't seem like the best laid out plan.
We switched, man, like one kind of terrorism for a whole other kind.
Right.
So we come to the American culture. I come into the the elementary school off the Army base, and I don't know the language. I got the wrong haircut.
That was my next thing. Did you know how to speak English?
Barely.
Okay.
And so I walk in, I'm like, hello, I'm David. And they're like, dude, you are so going to get beat up today.
Right, man.
So every nickname, every 7-Eleven joke, every turban joke, every what's the dot on the forehead, cable hookup joke. I got called Bean Dip, and I'm not even Mexican. I'd be like, you're not even an accurate racist.
Be intelligent about
Get it
exactly.
right, man.
And so we'd escaped halfway across the world, honestly, to like trade one kind of strife for a whole other kind. And for years and years, that was me. I was the kid who never got invited to parties, and everybody else got the birthday cards. I didn't get the birthday card.
God,
I was the
David,
kid who was
come
alone.
on, man.
Wow. Tear up here.
I know. Anyway, so for years, that was me until the day my freshman year in high school was about to start. And I'll never forget that. I was sitting in my room, and I was crying. My dad heard me. He came in. I told him, I said, Dad, nobody likes me. I don't like them. I'm getting beat up like a piñata. I said, let's just go back to Iran, And
Let's go back to Iran where everybody wants to kill us.
I was just alone.
Let's go back to
And
Iran.
my dad said, we can't go back. But by this time, we'd been in America long enough to know where to go when you're sad. He took me to the mall. And my dad gave me this makeover. I mean, I got new clothes, new haircut, new shoes, new everything that day. And, man, I walked in, Speedy, into the American high school as a freshman. And overnight, same insecure kid on the inside, but overnight with a makeover, I went from like geek to chic overnight. I mean, I went from Abdul to Julio. I found friends. And I found out what we all know, right? I found out that if I'll just conform to the patterns of this world, the opposite of Romans 12:1 and 2, right? If I just buy into the patterns of this world, people will just receive me. And so my high school years were the flip. My high school years, I learned how to
play the game.
I learned how to just put my brain on the top shelf and say, you know what, I'll just do what everybody wants me to do to be popular. So I learned how to end up at the right table. I learned how to dump the right girl before she could dump me. I learned how to be cold. to be perceived as cool. And I just played American culture, teenager world, right? And so when somebody handed me a beer, I was going to drink 5 of them to outdo them. When somebody said, this is what you're supposed to do, I just did even more because I was just this insecure kid trying to find friends. And so by the time I'd graduated from high school, and we'd actually moved a couple of times, but the game was the same. By the time I'd graduated from high school, I learned really well how to play that high school game. And I was one of the most popular kids in my school, but at least when I was a nobody, I was David Nasser the nobody, And it's so true where it says in Philippians in the Bible, it says, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world, but to forfeit his soul?
Right.
Because at least when I was a nobody, I was myself, but I just completely sold out. So I graduated high school, pretty popular, but I graduate with a 1.9 GPA.
Wow.
Notice Greg and I aren't laughing.
Yeah,
I know.
That's pretty good.
I know.
Congratulations.
Wow, you got that?
I don't want to get after it.
Well, at least you still worked hard while you were
Thank you. Yeah,
So you still have that commitment to educational excellence.
that's right.
Is the 1.9 not good?
My dad would ask me, he'd be like, "What is F in this credit card? In this report?" I'm like, "F is fantastic. It is good." I'm like, "It is good, Dad. It is
Fabulous,
good."
Dad. It stands for fabulous.
Fabulous,
The
Dad.
English word fabulous.
That's right.
All right, we'll come back. So now you're leaving high school with a stellar 1.9 grade point average.
That's right.
And you.
That's pretty low, man. You can't even go to Auburn with that, right? That's
Right.
not bad.
So that's good.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
That's
a little shot.
It actually is higher.
Iranian shot.
You actually have to have a higher grade point average. We won't get into that. Let's not let truth get in the way of a good joke. All right, let's
Never let accuracy get in the way.
And now you're getting ready to leave high school.
Yeah. Well, we had actually moved from Texas by this time a couple of times, and we'd ended up my senior year. I was here at Vestavia Hills.
So you were in Birmingham. You were in the
Alabama.
Birmingham area.
Yeah.
Now, did that have something to do with your sister?
Yeah, my sister. My dad was a military guy. He couldn't get a job in Killeen, Texas, at Fort Hood, but he found a job at Fort Rucker in Enterprise, Alabama. So we moved to Enterprise, and then from there we moved back to Texas, and then from there we moved. My dad. We moved back to Birmingham because when we used to live in Enterprise, my sister got a scholarship as a senior in high school to Montevallo. So we came here to Birmingham, and my dad opened a restaurant in Birmingham, of all things.
Would you like to tell everyone why he opened the restaurant?
Well, yeah, it's in the book, but I was telling y'all during the break. When I was in Texas in high school, as a junior in high school, I was this kid who just needed to fund his sin, and so not only it got expensive to where not only did I want to take drugs, but I wanted to start selling them. So I was selling a lot of marijuana. And my dad one time saw this big old roll of cash in my pocket. He was like, "Where did you get this money?" And I was like, I didn't have an answer. So I realized if I'm going to have $500-600 in my pocket, I need an excuse for my dad. And so I got a waiter job at a restaurant called Café de France. And my dad would always go, "Waiters are making $600-700 a shift," and I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, it's crazy what people will get." And so when we left Texas and we came to Alabama, we came to Birmingham, my dad thought in the back of his mind, well, if waiters are making this much money, like imagine what the owner can make. So he opened a restaurant and he called it Café de France.
Oh my goodness!
All right? So we never talked about any of that. Like my dad had no idea. So fast forward years later, and about 4 years ago, I write this book called Jumping Through Fires, which is my testimony. My dad gets a pre-release copy. He's reading it, and he's like, "You are doing the drugs during high school?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Wait a minute." And then he realizes, like, I never made that money as a waiter. He's like, "I went to the restaurant because I thought you were making the money." And so that whole thing was coming back.
Sorry, Dad.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Dad. Forgot to tell
sorry,
you
Dad.
about that.
But he did pretty well.
He
in the
made
restaurant
it work.
business.
Look,
He did pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called Café de France. There's not a lot of demand for Iranian cuisine in Birmingham,
Right, you
Alabama.
just
So
don't
that's
see
why he
that
went
one.
with a French thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, so we moved to Birmingham. I graduated from Vestavia Hills. I know we have a national audience here, but Vestavia Hills is a suburb here in Birmingham.
It's where the broadcast plaza is located.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's
We're
right
here.
here.
Yeah.
So I graduated from this neck of the woods, just not too far from here. And actually, our house was less than 2 miles from the studio. And when I graduated, as this kid who just partied and stuff like that. But I graduated pretty depressed because you graduate, you barely get your cap and gown with a 1.9 GPA, but then your life just falls apart. And all my friends went to this school and this school and this school, and I couldn't get accepted to any school. And I just was trying to find somewhere to be social. And about 2 months after graduation, one night I was in front of my house with the only buddy I had left who hadn't gone to college yet. And we were smoking some marijuana together. And while we're passing the joint back and forth, I looked at him and I said, man, like you've rolled up way too big a doobie here, man. This is like for 5 people. He goes, I know, I'm used to always having more people, but they're all gone. And so while we're depressed about the size of this joint and how not enough people are here to share it with us.
Right. And that can be so troubling.
It can be troubling. It's just bad stewardship, is what I was trying to tell him.
They messed up and had a 3.0.
That's right. That's right.
So they were gone.
How dare
That's right.
Yeah.
And so while we're passing this joint back and forth in front of my house, I said, man, our friends are gone. I mean, that's sad. And my buddy looks at me and he goes, they're not all gone. He goes, if you want, he goes, I got an idea. He goes, you ought to come to church with me tomorrow. And I'm kind of surprised he's invited me to church because he's literally handing me Mexican Red Bud while he's inviting me to church.
The devil's lettuce.
Yeah. And I know in the Bible, I know in Genesis it says God made the grass and it was good, but that's not what it means, right? And so I'm just kind of surprised. I'm like, you go to church? And he's like, man, I love church. And isn't that the South, by the way? Like everybody belongs to church somewhere. Yeah. And so I said, I'm not going to church. He said, why not? And I said, man, because I saw religion destroy my country when I was a kid. I want to have nothing to do with church. And instead of giving up, he tries one last thing. He throws up this like Hail Mary pass. He says, let me tell you who goes to my church. And he named the 5 prettiest girls from my high school. Oh, yeah. And when he got to the 5th girl, and he was like, bro, they all go to my church. I was like, here I am to worship. Let's go. I mean, I was motivated to visit. But I said, man, look, you've motivated me, but there's no way that my father will let me go to church. He said, why not? I said, well, my dad's a Muslim. He's not even a real Muslim, but he's not going to let me go to a Christian church. And he said, ask him. I said, I'm not asking him. He said, ask him. I said, I'm not asking him. He said, if you don't ask him, he said, I'm going to walk in your house right now and tell your dad you were smoking weed. Uh-oh. And so I felt motivated to ask him. Right. So on a Saturday night, knowing my father was going to say no, I walked in the house. I walked down the hallway, and my buddy came to the door to make sure I was going to ask him. And I knocked on my parents' bedroom door, and I said, Dad, it's midnight. I'm not late. I'm home. I'm safe. I said, I know you're going to say no. Don't even get out of bed. Just say no loud enough so my buddy can hear, so you can leave me alone. I said, he wants to know if tomorrow I can go with him to a Christian church. But instead of saying no, he's quiet for about a half a second, and then he goes, what is the name of it? And so I don't know what he's saying, right? But my buddy does. He's asking the name of the church. And he's so like, my buddy yells, he just yells out, Shades Mountain Baptist. And I'd never thought about that, didn't know what that was. And so as soon as my father hears that, this is just God at work here, God's sovereignty at work. My dad, just from the bedroom, he just yells, I know those people. You can go there, but only there. And I have no idea what's going on. But let me tell you what's going on. There's this man at this church, Shades Mountain Baptist, which is your home church.
Yeah, my home church, yeah.
There's this man at this church, Shades Mountain Baptist, who is the worship pastor of this church. His name is Aubrey Edwards. Yeah. And what I didn't know God was doing was about a month and a half before I'm getting invited to church by a buddy of mine who's not even a believer, this man and my father have striked up a friendship. And so Aubrey and some other people from the staff of this church and some of the leaders had been coming to my father's restaurant and just eating, and then they'd seen how he was shorthanded on wait staff. And so they were rolling up their sleeves and waiting on tables at his restaurant and just being missionaries at my dad's restaurant. Then Aubrey brought my dad to choir practice at Shades Mountain and said, this is my friend, Mr. Nasser, and he needs help at his restaurant. He got out a piece of paper and he said, if you're going to be in the choir, you're also going to help him out. And people signed up for free shifts to come and work in my dad's restaurant. They called it missions. My dad called it stupid Americans, but my God was working, right? And so God had used
By the way, look at the fruit of that action by this man.
Yeah. By the way, like that doesn't take a budget. You don't have to turn the children's wing into a rainforest cafe and go in a building. Like it's just a bunch of Christians who are Christ-like that showed up and saw, like you didn't have to have a passport to go do foreign mission work. Like there's an Iranian in our town, let's go win him to Jesus. And how we're going to do it is we're going to serve him with humility. And so God had used that, Rick, to massage my dad's heart. So when I get invited to church, and it happens to be the same church as the people that had been helping him, that is just an evidence of how God works together, all things for the good of his purpose. So my dad says, you can go there. So Sunday morning I get up, put on my chinos, go to this church, right? I walk in the gym. They're having a big old youth rally that day. And I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, I see like all these people I used to party with. So I walk up to them. Every other word out of my mouth is a cuss word because that's how we were outside the church. Except in the church, they're acting different. They're all walking around saying, bless you, bless you. Nobody's sneezing, And I'm like, what's wrong with these people? And within 5 minutes, I sit by myself in the front row, and I look up, and I see this guy, Larry No, walking straight towards me. Now, I went to Vestavia. Larry went to Hoover. and we were rivals. But even though we were rivals, everybody in our town knew Larry. He was half Korean, half American, and he was a football stud. And I had met him about a year before that Sunday when he was beelining towards me, when he had walked up to me at a party and he began to witness to me and my friends. He just walked up and he said, "Hey guys, I don't go to your school. I was driving by, saw all these people, and I wanted to tell you, all this stuff you're trying to fill your life up with is going to leave you empty." He pointed to a beer bottle in my hand. He said, "That's going to leave you empty." He pointed to my girlfriend. He said, "She's a good girl, but she's a horrible God." And he just started witnessing. He said, "Only Jesus is the bread of life. Only Jesus can give you hope." And man, I made fun of him. I laughed at him. I was really rude to him. He walks away, and a year later, Speedy, I'm sitting at his church, and he's beelining towards me. And I thought, he's going to get me back now. Now it's like his turn. And he walks up, and he goes, "I remember you." And that's exactly what I was afraid of. And I was like, "Hey, buddy." He goes, "Man, I'm so glad you're here." And he sat down beside me, and man, he was kind to me. I didn't have a Bible. He opened up his Bible, put it on the right page so I wouldn't feel left out. And after the Sunday school lesson was over, he said, "David, come tonight." And I had nothing to do, but I was full of pride. And I said, "Man, I got stuff to do." And he said, "All right, we'll come see you." And I had no idea what he meant, but 17 teenagers showed up at my house the next Monday night. And man, they showed up, and they had their Bibles, and they had their little bracelets, and they had their tracts that opened up into a cross. And man, they had their, gospel presentation, the Roman Road, and they sat in my house for 3 hours, and they just shared the gospel with me. And for the next 8 Mondays in a row, they came to my house. I mean, we were the Iranians, but we were getting terrorized by a bunch of Southern Baptists. Came over. And I heard the gospel for 8 weeks in a row.
Came to America, walking through his testimony. We're at the point now where he's now gone to a Christian church simply because his Muslim father saw that people of this church were kind to him while running his business, and he said he could go to this church and this church only. And you've gone to the service, and now there's teenagers from that church that are visiting you, presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ to you for 8 weeks in a row.
Yeah, man.
And then, so what happens next?
Well, Rick, for 8 weeks, I didn't just go to their church. They came to my house, and they shared the gospel with me, and that would be on Monday nights. And then on Sundays and on Wednesdays, they'd come to my house, and they'd drag me to church. Now, I say they dragged me to church, but I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I had to try to act cold and try to act cool, but deep down inside, there was something really different about these people. I knew all kinds of love, mom and dad love, boyfriend, girlfriend love, but I didn't know grace. Grace is just one-way love. Grace is scandalous. And so these people were just gracious, graceful. And I remember going there, and I remember paying attention somewhat. The music to me wasn't like the kind of music I listened to. I listened to Van Halen, and
Sure.
They led out of an organ, and stuff like that. But I remember just being a part of their culture, being a part of this church culture, and just really not feeling fit in. But what I remember the most was after church we'd go to eat, and they were just gracious. They were generous. They would pick up my tab. And one night, we went to this Shoney's to eat, and after we got done, we were all piling out, and we get in this car. We get in Larry No's Honda Accord, and man, we're backing out of the parking lot, and the waitress runs up, and she starts knocking. I'm in the back seat. She scared me to death. She knocks on the window right beside where I was sitting in the back seat. And Larry stops the car. He rolls the window down, and the waitress yells in the car. She goes, "Y'all need to get out of the car," because we're all just piled in there like sardines. And she said, "Somebody needs to check their wallet. You left me too much money." And she had this kind of wad of cash in her hand, and she said, "There's over $100 here." And she said, "Somebody must have accidentally put the wrong kind of bill in." And she told us how, when she went to check the tab, she realized there was way too much more than the tab. Tab was like $30.
Yeah.
Somebody had left her like $130. And Larry looked at her and he said, "Ma'am, that wasn't an accident." He said, "Ma'am, we knew it's Christmas or whatever it was." And he said, "We know you're working hard and you're trying to provide." And he said, "Man, we just wanted to bless you." And she just starts crying. And then he goes, "Ma'am, don't be sad." He goes, "We'll come back next week." And then she yells in the car in my ear. She goes, "Well, make sure you get my table."
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, man, we're leaving this parking lot, and people ask me all the time. They go, "When did you know Christianity was real?" And it wasn't the sermons. The sermons were great. It wasn't the music. I wasn't impressed by the marble walls in the sanctuary. I remember that day driving away, man, and looking in the rearview mirror and seeing this waitress weeping. And I just yelled in the car. I said, "What is wrong with you people?" I'd never seen graciousness. And they were like, "Jesus, man. Jesus is wrong with us." And so there's no telling what God does in someone's life and then through someone's life.
Yep.
And that night, I remember sitting there, and I finally understood grace, because I remember thinking she was a horrible waitress, and she got the opposite of what she deserved. and that's grace. That's grace. And so, man, I kept going to the church, and one night I was at their church, and Dr. Carter was preaching the gospel, and during the invitation, he said, if you need to come to Jesus, you come right here in the front. And I was convicted, but I was scared, and I thought, this is probably guilt. When you're lost, you think it's guilt. And so I hit the aisle, and I went the other way, and I thought, I'm getting out of here. I'm never coming back again. I remember thinking, they're starting to get to me.
Right.
And, man, I went home, and I sat in the house, and as soon as I got home, it felt like the presence of God was stronger at my house than in the church building. God's not contained in little steeples.
Sure.
Buildings. And
that Holy Spirit then followed you home.
That's right, man. It's like the psalmist says in Psalm 139, where it says, where can I go from your presence, O Lord?
Come on.
If I go to the mountains, you are there. If I go to the valleys, you are there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, man, I walk in my house. God's presence is just stronger in the house. I walk in. There's a stack of Bibles because all these Christians kept bringing me Bibles every time. They would get them from the Lost and Found and mark somebody's name out and put mine. And so I had every version. I had ESV, NIV, King James, the Lecrae Bible. I didn't have that, but you know what I'm saying? So I walk in. I grabbed the top Bible, man, and I just thought, I'm going to burn this thing and show God he can't get to me. Because they kept saying, let me tell you what God said. And they kept opening the Bible. So I thought, I'm going to burn this thing. But, man, I couldn't find one match in the house. I don't know if God was saying to the angels, there's a terrorist on the loose. Hide the match.
Right.
But I started reading that Bible, and the Word of God, man, just started convicting me. And that night, I gave my life to Christ. And, man, I've never been the same. I mean, it wasn't a behavior modification. I didn't switch from one religion to another. I didn't go from bad to good. I went from death to life.
Right.
And I gave my life to Christ, and I've never been the same. And God called me to ministry that night as well.
And here we are.
I got kicked out of the house for becoming a Christian. My parents were never devout until the night I became a Christian.
Sure.
And it was their pride, and I got kicked out. And I moved in with 6 guys that lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. But 5 months later, I saw my sister come to know the Lord, and 5 months after that, my brother Benji came to know the Lord, and 5 months after that, my mom came to know the Lord. And, man, it was crazy because my dad couldn't kick my mom out of the house. She's like calling me on the phone. She's like, I got saved tonight. I want your father to hear because he kicking me out of the house.
Right,
That's how she rolled.
Right, yeah.
And, man, like my mom was putting Bible verses in his food and his Rogaine. I mean, it was just everything, He was just relentless. And 2.5 years past that, God saved my dad.
Oh, amen.
And so one by one, man, we are a walking testimony of how the grace of God is greater than any religion.
Yeah, and we don't have enough time for it today, but you need to read the part in the book about his dad coming to know Christ. It's an incredible story.
Yeah.
With your mom's life on the line, he finally had nowhere else to turn.
Yeah.
And he turned to Jesus right there in that hospital.
That's right.
Because he thought his wife was about to die.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's an incredible story. But before we leave,
it's really not about an Iranian family, though. Honestly, it's about a church that was just the church. My story is not about an Iranian family that turned out okay. It's about a local church who understood mission. That's what I love about being a pastor of a church, because I haven't forgotten what it's like to be that refugee. I haven't forgotten to be what it's like to be that unchurched person in our own city. That just needs a local church to live it out in their own Jerusalem, in their local context.
Well, if you look, Christ City Church is the church that David is now the pastor of, and we were here when that took place, and I got an update on that yesterday. Got to go see the church and the community that you're serving.